chaps. Here we go, eyes down for round 2. And we start off with the question from Chris Eccleston, which is incredibly, deceptively simple. What are your views on fracking? Niall Plevin-kelly from UKIP.
A deceptively simple and direct answer for you. I actually break ranks here with UKIP. UKIP's policy is basically to support fracking given efficient safeguards, etc., etc. My personal opinion on this one is that I have 2 thoughts for you. Number one, we can't just ignore it. It's a resource there. I know there are potentials for environmental disasters and contamination of the earth and all sorts of things, and I fully appreciate that and respect it. We do need to do an awful lot more research into fracking. But, as I said, I don't think we can afford to ignore it. Renewables, hopefully, given their fruition and development, will provide a significant portion of our energy sources. But our energy requirements are growing at an exponential rate. They really are. It's estimated that we, by 10 years' time, will be importing nearly 60 to 70% of our gas for not only domestic cooking, but also for electricity generation. And I think it would be naive to ignore shale gas extraction, but it does need a lot of research.
Niall, thank you ever so much. Rob Walsh, Liberal Democrat, to frack or not to frack?
So not to frack. It's far too risky. Okay, I think we've all heard of the horror stories from Pennsylvania of methane in the water and also the effects it has on the animal food chains. If we want to ever seriously frack in the future, much more research needs to be done. I'm not convinced we shouldn't do it. And the other point I think is very important to make about fracking is that even if we did frack, and even if it could be fracked safely, it doesn't deal with the issues of CO2 emissions. Okay, our CO2 emissions are still too high. We need to deal with it, and we won't deal with it by fracking.
Carrie, that's come up on the doorstep from various people. What are your views?
It does, given the situation that we've got, obviously down the road in Boris there. Plaid have been quite consistent in our opposition to fracking. We've supported local campaigners at the camp over in Boris who've done a fantastic job, I think, to raise awareness about the potential implications of fracking in Wrexham. Fracking's banned in France, Bulgaria, in the Netherlands and in parts of Germany because of the environmental concerns and because of the concerns about health. I'd make a broader point as well in terms of Wales. We actually already produce twice as much electricity as we use. But our bills in Wales are on average 5% more than the rest of the UK, and 30% of our population are living in fuel poverty. So I think we've got a very different debate to have here in Wales in terms of energy, in terms of making sure that our resources benefit our communities here. But it certainly makes the point that there is not a case for fracking in Wales at all.
It is a non-renewable energy source, and there are profound safety concerns about fracking, and Labour will oppose fracking. It supports a moratorium, and it supports devolution of fracking within Wales. So I have a consistent record of supporting renewable energy, solar in particular, the investment that came into Wrexham through Sharp UK, which I worked extremely hard to secure and provided 10 years' worth of jobs. Until the Tory government introduced a feed-in tariff scheme that completely undermined the industry within the UK. So I support renewables, always have done, and we should be very proud in Wrexham of the renewables that we see on our rooftops in this town. If we had as much across the country as we have in Wrexham, then we'd be doing really well.
With a plethora of issues on the doorstep, does fracking come up? Have people talked about it to you?
Yes, they have. And contrary to belief, I'm not pro-fracking entirely, contrary to local belief. I'm not advocating it at the moment. As Niall said, it must be tested thoroughly for many years. I believe there's a moratorium until 2020 in Wales. But I do honestly think that at some stage it must come. I don't think renewable energy will be enough to sustain the country in future years. Presently, we're relying on Mr. Putin's Russian gas. He's a strange fella. He could go either way, so we've got to be careful there. So I do think, regrettably, at some time, fracking or something similar will come. I'm sure people had their concerns about coal mines, 150 years ago. Will the earth collapse and so on? No, it hasn't. But it needs considerable research, a lot of research before we can actually go ahead. I do agree with Rob on that.
Brian, thank you ever so much. David Munnerley from the Greens, this is your cue, fracking.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. Regarding Putin and Russia, hardly any of our gas comes from Russia. It comes from Norway and Qatar, so there you go.
Ukraine, really, Ukrainian gas.
Basically, I think we actually, don't want to get sidetracked too much in a way, but we need to be reducing our energy use and we need to start insulating homes properly. Our housing stock in this country is an absolute joke, and I think that's where we need to actually start looking at, because if you have a really high energy use, then we're going to need energy. So I think that's something we need to look at. And of course, we need to go down the renewable route, because why haven't buildings got solar on them? Why isn't every new building built, commercial, industrial, why haven't they got solar? It just doesn't make sense to me.
David, thank you. Last but not least, Andrew from the Conservatives.
Thanks very much. I've made my views on fracking known. I've made them quite clear that I support a moratorium on fracking. I've done that I've reached my own conclusions through going to an anti-fracking meeting. I've spoken to anti-frackers. I even managed, it was very difficult to find, but I even managed to find a pro-fracking meeting for the sake of balance to try and get some information. I have concerns of an environmental nature. I have concerns about the science as well, which is why I fully support a moratorium on fracking. I had conversations with Antoinette Sambach, the Conservative Assembly member, who was for North Wales, who was the Shadow Environment Minister, to discuss those concerns, and we have ended up with a party position that I like to think supports now a moratorium on fracking. What I will say is that I don't rule it out forever. I'm happy to look at it again in, say, 5 years or whatever, after this moratorium, see where we are, but I've made it very, very clear, I've said this again, I think on my wrexdebate.com video as well, that if I feel the same as I do now with the same concerns in 5 years' time, then I would vote against it, whatever my party's position.
An awful lot of the supporters of fracking would say it could underpin a vital part of Britain's economy as well as its future energy sources, and yet people obviously feel strongly enough to camp out at Boris and share their opinion. Do you think that it's going to happen regardless of what you say here? Rob?
It doesn't have to happen, because you've got to remember that the issue at Boris Head, it was actually the exploratory drilling was actually rejected by Wrexham Council's planning committee, but unfortunately that was overturned, which I think is absolutely disgraceful, because local voices were not listened to, because local voices are the best, and why they overturned it, I think, was complete disregard to local people.
Ian?
One of the reasons I argued in favour of devolution of fracking was because I knew that we had a Conservative Liberal Democrat government at Westminster that would push through the infrastructure bill and were in the face of opposition to fracking, and I knew that we had a Labour government in Wales that supported a moratorium. That's why there won't be fracking within Wales, and the moratorium will be in place.
Andrew, you said moratorium.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to lay down a challenge for Ian as well to get through a sentence without the word Tory or coalition and just focus on his own plans and his own ideas, because it's getting a bit tiresome.
Well, I'm standing on a Labour manifesto.
If I can
He is the Tory candidate. I know he may not be wearing a blue rosette, but please remember that.
Thank you. I don't think people will have trouble remembering that I'm the Conservative candidate. I support the moratorium, as has been said. My personal view is I don't think that at the moment it's economically viable anyway. I think that it's... I think we are seeing some results from around the world where they've fracked in America and the like, which has had an impact on the oil price and the like globally. But I think this is going to, this is going to be devolved to Wales. I think there is no appetite in Wales for it politically, and that, you know, with the moratorium and everything else, I don't think it will happen in Wales. I really don't.
Brian, view to the contrary.
Well, no, I would like to contradict David. I'm sure that 70% of our gas is from Ukraine at the moment. If that's Russia, well, I think that's a figure. I might be wrong, David, but okay, fair enough. If I'm wrong, fair enough, but I believe I'm right. And I do believe that at some time, fracking, it must come. Well, 10, 20, 30 years. Regrettably, maybe, but and it have to be well tested, but I do think it will have to come into this country.
Brian says it's inevitable. Carrie?
I don't think it's inevitable. I think it's a good example of where we can go in a different direction in Wales to the rest of the UK thanks to devolution. One thing I would ask, and it's great to hear Andrew tonight say that, you know, he's against fracking, and we've been in hustings over the last few weeks. I've heard Andrew say he's against the bedroom tax and other things as well. Are you sure you're standing for the right party?
Yeah. Join Plaid! Join Plaid! Join Plaid!
I'll thank Carrie for actually being positive because it makes a nice contrast. But there isn't enough time for me to answer that. Of course, I'm in the right party. I have conservative values, but I think it's important that we have an independent mind. I don't think we elect somebody that goes down to Westminster just to vote for the party line. We elect somebody on those values. We elect somebody to represent us, and I think it's an MP's job to liaise with people, seek their views, and do their best to represent them. I've made my views known on fracking. That is also the Conservative line now, so that's not against my own party in Wales. Sorry?
It's not the Conservative line.
Right, well, I disagree with you on that.
David Cameron going out?
I said in Wales, my party's view in Wales...
This is the UK general election. You are standing on the Tory manifesto.
I have told you my views. This is the Welsh Conservative Party. I have told you my views on that. And my views, like I said, I will not have enough time to address the other point that Carrie raised, but I disagree with what she said because I've made clear the other night how much I support an element of that policy, but I've made clear how uncomfortable I am with a part of it.
We're all uncomfortable with the Tories.
And some people abstained.
Yeah, we did. Some people supported an amendment.
I think we're going to get a little bit petty for a while.
Finally, David, obviously you were stressing the point that, you know, if we insulate homes properly, if we go with all of renewable technology, we don't need to do things like frack. But then we're a country that was rejoicing when petrol was down to almost £1 a litre. So are we actually going to be as good as our word?
Basically, we're ruled by massive corporations.
Yeah.
Okay? Simple as.
Yes.
Conservatives, Labour are ruled by those corporations.
Yeah.
Not true. Corporation rules me. 10 times as many homes are insulated in Wales because we have a Welsh Labour government. And if you go and walk around Wrexham, you will see the insulation in our homes. In fact, David, your home has probably been insulated by the Welsh Labour government through the funding. 10 times as many. That's the difference a government can make. And that's why governments matter. And the Labour Party is not controlled by big business. Most of them have been signing letters to make sure that Ed Miliband should not be Prime Minister, which is exactly why you should vote for him. Because we represent working people and we are the alternative government.
Yeah, Niall.
Ian, would you therefore support a project that abandons such vanity projects as HS2 and divert that money into sustainable energy and insulations?
Yes.
HS2 could create a huge benefit to North Wales. How? By linking the North Wales to the economy that is driving at the present time most of the UK, which is the southeast of England.
Surely it's just going to speed up.
I know as Wrexham's MP how important links to the southeast and to the northwest of England are, and how that will help business in North Wales. We have international trade that UKIP's policy would decimate by taking away the biggest export market for businesses like Kellogg's, like Magellan, like Tritech, like Cytec, and kill the best paid jobs in our community. So
going back 50 years is no policy at all. It will destroy jobs in Wrexham. Absolute piffle.
I'm sorry, Rob, I need to come back to that. That
Briefly,
basically is fundamentally untrue. UKIP, the extraction of the UK from Europe will allow us to negotiate our own trade agreements, not only with the European community, who we will still trade with, but also with the rest of the world, free from European restrictions to do so. We have completely ignored our trading partners in the former Commonwealth because we're not allowed to. And to say that extraction of Europe of Britain from Europe will cause trade problems is just fundamentally flawed.
Okay, guys, on the way from fracking to Europe, we have one last question. One last question. This lovely lady's going to answer it.
Hi. As an immigrant and a student in Wales, it's an important issue for me. What is your party's policy on immigration, and do you feel that immigrants are being negatively represented and unfairly discriminated against?
I gave a little hint of what I believe on this issue before when I tackled the point of Brian's about immigration. And yes, I think there is a bit of quite a bit of negativity around this, and I think there's a lot of myths that need busting as well. I think that immigration is largely a good thing for this country, but it has brought some problems as well, and that needs to be addressed in a balanced and measured way. And that's not the debate that we're having in this country at the moment. I don't think it is balanced and measured enough. I support fully, this is going off a bit of a tangent now, a referendum on Europe. And I'll give you the reason why I'm saying this. I believe that people need to have a say on Europe. Personally, I want to stay in a heavily reformed Europe. Europe addresses some issues of immigration as well, and that's why I brought that in. My point is, I want to see, before a referendum, a much more sensible debate as a country. If you look at the Scottish referendum, they had a sort of 2-year period where people really engaged with the issues, and they learned all there was to know about it, and they got that information from independent sources, and they went and voted. At the moment, when it comes to Europe, when it comes to immigration and all these issues, I don't think we're anywhere near a sensible debate in this country where people are informed enough about the good points, the bad points, enough to make a decision. So I want to have that sensible debate.
The hand of time is on you now. Ian Lucas.
We can't have a debate about immigration within the European Union because immigration within the European Union is not regulated at the present time. There is free movement. We don't know whether David Cameron is going to restrict that free movement, because if he seeks to, it will require treaty change that none of the other members will agree to. So we have the promise of a referendum, but we don't know the detail of what we're going to be voting on at the present time. Immigration is an issue in Wrexham, and immigration needs to be managed. It is managed at the present time because from outside the EU there are restrictions. We need a fair system that people accept and a regulated system. There is no confidence at the present time in the immigration system from outside the EU, so that needs to be fundamentally changed. But we do need to manage the system, and we need to accept that people should not have access to benefits within the UK if they're not resident within the UK.
Ian, thank you. David Munnerley from the Greens.
Okay, well,
He's not swallowed it.
I think it is something we need to talk about. I don't think you can just, say to people, if a lot of people are concerned about immigration, a lot of the UKIP supporters, then okay, you need to listen to them. You can't just go, nah, not listening to you. But in all honesty, migration is a good thing. Immigration is a good thing. The movement of people is a good thing, and that's the Green Party stance. Simple.
I think one of the things that's come from the election is that there are more British migrants out there than we've had immigrants in here. Carrie, Harper from Plaid-Cymru.
Well, I agree we shouldn't dodge any issue. No issue should be taboo, but we do need to have a balanced debate. And I think the danger is because of the rhetoric we're getting from UKIP, this blame immigrants for everything mentality. We can't have a balanced debate, and I think that's a dangerous situation because I think that can be very divisive for our communities. But I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a Welsh perspective on Europe because you won't hear that from any of the London parties. And actually, we've got 200,000 jobs in Wales that are reliant on the EU, and Wales actually benefits to the tune of about £40 per head from being in the EU. So it's a very different situation for us here, and that's an important point to make. But the truth is, the real issues facing our communities are things like low wages and lack of affordable housing. It's not people coming here to work.
From the Liberal Democrats, Mr. Rob Walsh.
I think we've got to remember that immigration has been mostly a positive thing for this country because we have had a major global recession, our economy suffered a major heart attack, and we're only just recovering, okay? Certain parts of the country are recovering better than others, but we wouldn't have done that without immigration, okay? Because they've helped power our slow recovery. And I think one of the problems we've got, which I have on the doorstep, is people don't understand the difference between EU and non-EU migration. Okay, non-EU migration, okay, that's more under control now. Obviously, we want to welcome people from other parts of the world, but as long as it's the right numbers. EU immigration, despite what Labour and the Tories will say, they're not going to get any treaty changes from the EU. Okay, well, if we do, it'll take a long time. So I do think this idea that we're going to get changes before 2017 and then have a referendum, I think is ludicrous. So we're just wasting our time on that. So we've just got to accept the system as it is for now.
Niall, Plevin-kelly, UKIP and immigration always hyphenated together.
They are indeed, and a lot of the points I'd like to make tonight have already been made by the other parties. Immigration in itself is a good thing. Britain needs migrants. We have a massive skills gap in a variety of sectors that we cannot satisfy from our own resources. We need immigrants. That's a simple and straightforward fact.
Nigel,
What?
blaming them for everything then?
I am not here to speak for Nigel. I'm not here to speak for Nigel Farage. He's quite capable and big enough and ugly enough to speak for himself. However, what I was going to say is that what we do not need is uncontrolled immigration. We cannot just continue to open our borders to everybody from Europe and also from the rest of the developed world who just wishes to come here at will. We need...
You don't understand what borders are, do you?
We have no borders with Europe. That's half the problem. We need to re-establish our own internal borders, and we need to control immigration to those people who are going to be of economic and social benefit to this country. That's the bottom line with UKIP. To the UK.
Brian Edwards, you're standing as an independent, so you can be completely independent on this.
I'm going to enjoy myself now.
Go ahead.
As Ian said, immigration is an issue, obviously. There are two sides to the coin. We've had some excellent inputs from immigrants, obviously. But to me, the danger and the problem is not so much immigration as illegal immigration and the failed asylum seeker. I think the clue is in the title there, the failed asylum seeker. Should they be deported more quickly? I think so. If they've failed, why is still in the country? I think Ian's Labour's open door policy was not a very good thing, obviously, many years ago. And to be honest, I can't see the country can sustain such levels. We're bursting at the seams. Something must be done, I believe.
Thank you ever so much. How much of a press button issue has immigration been for you all on the doorsteps whilst you're canvassing? Carrie?
It is an issue, but I think that fears are stoked by the type of rhetoric we've had, and yes, UKIP are to blame for that, but I think the other parties, Labour and the Tories as well, have moved more to the right on this, and that hasn't helped the situation. Now, at the end of the day, we've got to work to bring our communities together. So yes, let's have a balanced debate, but let's get rid of this rhetoric, and let's get rid of this blame and game of pointing the finger at people.
Ian Lucas, Labour horribly wrong over 10 years ago with the amount of migrants who came in.
The number of migrants who came in after 2004 was much greater than people anticipated, and we have had enormous change within Wrexham. We all know that. But what we need to do is manage that change. We need to have a receptive view of other cultures within Wrexham. We've had a big change in the last 15 years within the town, but we also need to do more like building more homes within our communities, which is what's desperately needed for the people who live here, for the people who live within Wrexham. And
13,000?
we have more homes, and I've seen that with Rivulet Road, Hightown. You've seen that there's new homes that have been built, and we can create jobs, create wealth, and make progress by building far more homes, which is what we really need to do.
We need affordable homes. Affordable housing.
Wrexham's
to go back to the boom and bust. Back to the boom and bust again.
Wrexham's always had a traditional Polish population, for example. Rob Walsh, like you were saying about managing this, control. Is this manageable though?
The EU immigration? No, I don't think it is. I think one of the reasons why so much has been stoked up and why we've seen the rise of UKIP over the past 10 years is because I think that Tony Blair was very naive when he signed those treaties, just to let immediate open border immigration from Eastern Europe. It should have been a slower process, and I don't think we would have had all this stoke up, all this fear, all this unnecessary fear, okay, and that's led to the rise in popularity of people like Nigel Farage. It should be so, but what's done is done. But this idea that we can change the rules, it's not going to happen. We've just got to accept it. And if any rules that do change are going to take a long time, not 2 years.
Niall, are you convinced by what you're hearing here?
To a certain degree, I think what I'm hearing basically is other parties' adaptation to the UKIP manifesto.
So they're getting closer to UKIP, not...
Some of the stuff I'm hearing is straight out of here. Absolutely. Slightly watered down, but straight out of here. Immigration is an issue. Everybody who is coming up to me when we're out canvassing in town, it's probably the #1 issue. Number 2, health service. Number 1 is immigration. We can't sustain uncontrolled immigration. It's not about racism. It's got nothing to do with racism. It's about economics. We physically cannot sustain the levels of immigration that are...
Bullshit. Absolute
Sorry, I can't
bullshit.
hear you.
Language.
Discourage... I'm sorry,
You encourage discrimination in your manifesto. In papers that you were handing out around Wrexham,
Yes?
it said that they encourage discrimination for businesses so that they can discriminate, and actually use the word discriminate between candidates.
No, businesses will be allowed to promote British jobs for British peoples without fear of reprisal. That's exactly what it said.
You're a racist.
Andrew Atkinson,
I'm not a racist.
is the Conservative Party moving closer to UKIP as Niall claims?
I hope not. The one point I'd like to make just quickly on that is immigration does come up quite a bit on the doorstep. The NHS comes up a heck of a lot more. But I think if you see a brightly coloured UKIP van in town and you're somebody who's minded to vote that way, you're going to head to the UKIP van and talk to them about immigration. So it'll probably sound a bigger issue to UKIP than it might to anybody else, because you're going to attract those sort of people to talk about those sort of issues. I agree with a large chunk of what Rob said. I think when those sort of floodgates, if you like, were thrown open, I think if there had been some welfare reform to help people back into work, there wouldn't have been as many jobs for people from abroad to come over and do. I think also we've got to address, as has been said, the skills shortage that we've got here. We've got to make sure that we've got people, that we're training people through the universities, locally through apprenticeships and everything else, that are going to come out the other side with jobs that they can do, that we match up, the need that we've got with the skills and the training and everything else, so that we can, grow our own skill set here to fill those jobs. And that is a very, very important thing to do to address that issue. So we have free movement of people, but if we take care of some of those issues ourselves in terms of training our own people, welfare reform, benefits reform as well when it comes to what people can access when they come here, even though, as I said earlier, most people who come here to work, not to claim benefits, but it is still something that needs to be addressed.
Andrew, thank you. David, you were talking about immigration being the lifeblood of the country.
I was just going to say, this issue seems to be a diversion for what I believe is probably the biggest issue, which doesn't get talked enough about, which is austerity. And to me, this is what is this all about, austerity? I do not know.
It's not a question I can answer in 60 minutes.
Well, I can. Austerity is about giving the Tories the excuse to implement their ideology of dismantling the welfare state for a start. That's what austerity is.
A little far off the topic of immigration, but to wind up, a whole minute to sell themselves in order to get your vote, and that first minute goes to David from the Green Party.
Well, I want to go for a few pints, so I'll keep it to about 10 seconds. If you want a fairer, nicer, happier, healthier country, vote Green.
Give you an extra 45 seconds drinking time there. So there we go. Rob, you have 12 seconds to... It sounds a bit like Countdown, doesn't it? You have 12 seconds to beat, but Rob, your minute.
Okay, well, thank you. You've seen all the candidates here. Now it's time to make your choice. Many of you will have already voted, but some of you still may not have made up your mind. Just want to conclude by saying, remember, the MP who you elect represents you, represents all constituents, okay? If they find themselves in a position where they can influence government policy, then that's a bonus, but their priority is the people of Wrexham, okay? So you don't have to vote purely on party lines. If you voted for one party all your life, have a look at us, you might change your mind as a result. So I think it's important that we bring faith back into politics, faith back into democracy, and we can start in Wrexham. So I urge people, unite behind me, vote Rob Walsh on May the 7th. Thank you very much.
Well, we hope you did as well. Well done that. Next, Plevin-kelly from UKIP.
If you want a representative in Westminster who is free to represent the people of Wrexham and only the people of Wrexham, without any party whips to subdominate us, and if you want somebody who will work hard for Wrexham, representing them in Westminster, then you vote UKIP. The other thing is that you will hear my colleagues either side of me talking about funding for NHS, etc. The Labour Party have this much flaunted mansion tax, which is going to be spread so thin it's going to be unworkable. The Conservative Party want to make 12 billion cuts to welfare, but they will not specify where. There is only one party sitting here that has a fully funded, fully costed and independently audited budget plan. And that's you.
Carrie, Harper, your 60 seconds.
Well, it's very likely that no one party is going to win this election, and what that means that it's the smaller parties that are going to have the influence this time, the likes of Plaid Cymru, the SNP and the Green Party, and we'll use our influence to end austerity, to lock the Tories out of government and to make sure we get the best deal for Wales. So I hope you'll support Team Wales next week.
Brilliant, thank you very much. As I said before, you've heard a little bit this evening about the kind of things that I'm really passionate about for Wrexham, as well as some of the things that I want to do at a national level. I want to really put the heart and soul back into our town centre, as I said at the beginning. I've got plans to make Wrexham a better place. We've got a great town, but it could be so much better. To attract more businesses, more jobs, more investment, address any issues that we have with infrastructure, to make the town more accessible and really help us to expand businesses here, expand jobs, expand opportunity. Contact me anytime if you have any questions at all. If I can help with anything, I will. If I can answer those questions, I will. All I would ask for is that you would please, on May the 7th, consider giving me a chance. We could have change in Wrexham for the first time in 80 years, and that might just be worth considering. Thank you very much.
In Lucas, it's probably not as long as you get when you actually ring the doorbell and people appear at the doorstep, but your minute starts now.
The most important issue for Wrexham today is the local economy. In 2010, the Tories and the Lib Dems said that they were going to eliminate the deficit by 2015. That's their target, and they failed. They're telling you now it's going to take a few more years for them to eliminate. What we need is change, and we need change and investment in the economy to build a local economy that benefits the people of Wrexham and gives some hope to our young people and some security for our vulnerable people. Labour will drive forward Wrexham, will link it into our local economies and make it the important place it needs to be. And we will scrap the bedroom tax to protect our vulnerable people.
You close
Your minute, sir.
Right, thank you. Well, I won't take the full minute, but very briefly, as stated in my manifesto, I, as a local man, would be very proud to represent this constituency. I could put my hand on my heart and say that I would seek to carry through all the issues stated in the manifesto. That's why I made them. You'll have an independent voice, fresh ideas, away from the stereotypical MP. So I ask you to vote Edwards and vote independent on May the 7th. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that almost concludes absolutely everything. The one certainty we have right now is, electorally across Britain, there are no certainties. We don't know at all what's going to happen come Friday morning. But One of these 7 people will be Wrexham's next MP, and I suppose to do an anti-Russell Brand moment, there's the world's ultimate context, because May the 7th, everyone gets a chance to vote. On May the 9th, it's the 70th anniversary of VE Day. If you needed context as to why you turn up and put a cross on a piece of paper, that's got to be it. Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much. Good night.